Working Dragon Mystic. We're gathered here for another round table. Tonight's topic will be the Arcane Senses. How do you perceive them? What are they? How can you train them? Do you have to be born with it? And if you're not, are you just screwed? All those wonderful things. I'm Drake, and I'm joined tonight by Jade, and once again by Sephi, to add in some nice little insight onto this topic. This, I think, is probably the single largest question-based topic anywhere that Working Dragon Mystic is, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's over on Rumble, whether it's in the emails or in the Gilded servers. I think at least daily we see some form of question surrounding the Arcane Senses. And for those of you who may just be joining the channel for the first time, when we use the term Arcane Senses, we are talking about using your senses in a psychic or metaphysical manner, not your physical senses. A lot of people refer to these as the clairs or clairaudience, clairsentience, touch. I can't think of all the clairs now. But clairsentience, look up clairaudience, clairsentience, you'll get all the clairs there. And we do have an arcane site course over at workingdragonmystic.com at the online school. It's absolutely free, so you can check that out. We've done a few videos, but we wanted to go in depth tonight. And Jade, I'm going to start with you because I know that when you found the channel, because you've told me this and you've shared it in roundtables before, you practiced for, I believe you said, a few years, which that still baffles me. No results, and then you came over and everything started shifting. Would this include the Arcane Senses? And if so, how did your viewpoint of those shift?
Actually, yes. So definitely when I did join, when I started watching your videos and I took the Arcane Sight class, my train of thought completely changed, because up until that point, I literally thought that your arcane sight was seen with your physical eyes, heard with your physical ears. And so I was at a loss, because I was like, okay, so I guess I'm just not skilled. Or don't have the ability to do it. And so I was like, okay, well then I guess I'm just a dud in that point, because obviously I can't see or hear anything other than what's physically in front of me. And that was part of the roadblock that I had, and what almost made me give up on Magick, aside from some other things. But when I took Drake's class on the arcane sight, it made me realize that the arcane sight and the physical sight are two completely different components. And I had to learn to separate my train of thought of thinking that what I was trying to see with my sight, I couldn't see with my eyes, and learning that what a lot of people peg off as like imagination is actually you using your arcane sight.
Yes.
Because you're seeing with your mind, and your mind is perceiving that something is in front of you, but your physical eyes can't see it. And that was a hard thing for me to get past, because then you're questioning yourself on whether what you're seeing with your mind is actually there.
Correct.
And and learning to work with that and get reliable results was definitely a process and a lot of practice.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And you are correct. That shifting of the mindset, a lot of people they think that it's going to be just like physical hearing or physical sight. And it's really not, especially starting out. Now, Sephi, interestingly enough, I am so glad you decided to join us, because a lot of people might think you married some crazy ass Southern mage who his attention to detail is insane. And like, he keeps notes, he tests his own notes, he questions himself. So clearly you must be a magician of that same mindset to put up with him. What most people may find out is my wife, I would not even refer to her as a mage, because what she does, she just does it. I don't even think she can explain it. But what I do notice when it comes to mental imagery, she's one of the best. Like ever since when we first met, for her, books were what she loves. Like she's actually somebody I know doesn't like the Harry Potter movies because in her mind she saw a much better movie when she read the book. So with that and the way you just do things, I'm not sure you and I have ever actually sat down and discussed arcane senses and how you think and view about them. Now, obviously, we went camping, so you had plenty of time in the woods to think this over because you knew you was going to join us for this roundtable. So it's not like I'm just throwing you under the bus here, just so the audience knows I'm not that mean. Uh, what's your perception on this?
It took me a long time to figure out. I'm actually still have to sometimes question myself. Am I seeing it through my arcane senses or is it my imagination? I had a very good imagination as a child, or what everyone told me was my imagination, to the point where my invisible friends, I had them all named, and they were small enough to fit in my hands. And I would cry because one of them, I don't know if they actually died or I thought they died, but I literally would cry over them. So today, I think maybe I was seeing fairies, but I was told these were my imaginary friends. So I'm not, my side is pretty good, but I don't need to see things to know they're there most of the time. And a lot of times I don't even see them with my arcane senses as much as feel them. It's more of a feeling that they're there.
Right.
And one thing is a lot of people don't talk about is sense of smell.
That's
And
true.
I have a very weird sensation of that because I don't smell things normally very well at all.
Yeah, your
Like
nose doesn't work, and that's even before 2020. You can't say the word, but it's before 2020. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
So I cannot spell ruined sour cream, putting it right under my nose most of the time.
No, I
But I
remember
can
that.
walk through a room and smell cigar smoke where no one has smoked a cigar ever. So
Yeah, there's an entity tends to hang around the house that does love him some cigars. And it's interesting because for the longest time, I always assumed you might be picking up on lingering tobacco odors, but maybe I had a cigar because I know that stuff hangs around. And if you're even like a month later, if because I may have a cigar once a year, but a month or two it'll linger. When it was officially, nope, sorry, it's not me in any way, was the new place. I have not had a cigar in this house yet, and you keep smelling it. I think you said once a week at least.
it's
So
off and on with that.
yeah, so that's pretty cool. And I like how you said you don't have to see them or hear them. It's more of you just feel their presence. Because
Mm-hmm.
that is true. That is, the ability to feel things around you. That is one of your arcane senses there. But I do know that you occasionally see my guardian dragons running around. You used to watch them chase your cats, even. So
They still do.
that is true. The cats they've left the physical, but they haven't left us alone. um, so that is interesting, and it's a good point. And you mentioned your imagination. Both of
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned that word imagination. And I think it would surprise most people to know that your imagination is your arcane senses. It's the exact same function. They use the same function. So when you're using your arcane sight, it is going to use the ability to generate what your imagination would generate.
It uses your mind's eye. The
Right.
same thing your imagination does.
Whether it's a sound, whether it's a smell, whether it's an image, whatever it is that the arcane senses are taking in, it's using that imagination protocol. And that's why kids are so adapted of seeing things, is because no one's ever told them it's just their imagination.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
that is one thing. Like when people are asking and wondering, I'm seeing this, is it my imagination? Well, technically, regardless if it's arcane senses or not, the answer is yes. The trick there then comes to, are you seeing what you're seeing or are you making it up?
Mhm. And I
That's
think that comes down to practicing and repeating what you did before to see if you get the same result as far as seeing, hearing, or feeling through your arcane senses. Because that's how you can validate that what you are experiencing is valid.
yeah,
Because if it was made up and you tried to repeat it, if it doesn't come back as the same result, obviously it wasn't something tangible. But repeating, trying to see a spirit of an animal that had passed, or reaching out to a deity, if you're getting the same results over and over again, then you're obviously tapping into those arcane senses and being able to see those things manifest in front of you with your mind's eye.
that is correct.
And I do like that you touched on the kids being able to see, because as many of you all know, I do have 2 kids. My son absolutely sees my dragon friends running amok in the house. Funniest thing ever, especially because my guardian dragon does love to wrestle with the dogs. I have 2 very large dogs, and she loves to get rough with them. And my daughter, she's still a toddler, but and so she's still learning to develop her words and everything. But there are often many times where she is pointing to a blank part of the room. Nobody is there, and I know she sees something, and she's pointing directly at something over there. Um, and so I eventually, once when she learns to speak a bit more, I'd love to actually hear what she's interpreting when she sees things and points at them.
Now, have
And
you thought
Stephanie,
of
I did want to.
opening your sight to look at what she's looking at?
Oh, I have, and
Okay.
I do know what she's looking at, but I just want to see what she's interpreting.
No, I get it.
Because
I was wondering from
yeah.
the parental side of the fence if you.
Oh, absolutely. Oh no, I have my house on security surveillance with my arcane sight, so I know
There
what's
you go.
coming in and out at all times. But Steffi, I love the fact that you mentioned about the cigar smoke, because hubby, my husband, even though he doesn't practice as much as I do and practices arcane sight as much as I do, you will be walking around the house and then out of nowhere start choking on cigar smoke. And none of us smoke in the house. And I know exactly which entity it is. And he was like, okay, can they turn it down just a little bit? Because that was a bit too much for me.
No, telling them to turn it down is only going to turn it up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I love the fact that Steffi, you're getting similar experience on that. And then, like, as far as, the feeling and everything, I do relate with Steffi on that as well, because I don't always tap into my arcane sight, but I know when specific deities or entities are around because of their energy that's around me. And
Mhm.
it's weird to explain, but even though like your arcane touch, like the way your mind interprets it, and then you feel it at the same time. Like, for instance, if Loki is wanting to talk into my ear, every time he is around, my left ear burns. Now, there's nothing physically touching my ear to make it burn, but I can feel heat in my ear. And it's every single time, only Loki. And, learning how to pick up on the energetic, I call them energetic signatures, I guess,
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
um, is really fascinating, because I don't always have to have my arcane sight going, because I know how their energy feels when they're around.
Yeah. And that's actually an interesting thing when we talk about the senses signatures. Because when we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about the arcane senses, one of the questions that falls in there is, what does this entity feel like? What does
Mm-hmm.
this category feel like? And I always tell them, that's a hard one to answer because it is very personal. It can be different for
Mhm.
everyone. And the best answer I could give would be a broad generality at best, or how it feels for me. Like Jade, you're
Mhm.
talking about when Loki's around, your ear starts burning. That just makes me think of my sister. Like once my sister passes away, I think my ear's going to start burning when she's around because my
Mhm.
sister's a beautician, which is a professional gossip, if y'all don't know, in the South. And you know that's the old euphemism is your ear burning? Somebody must be talking about you.
Mhm.
And I mean, growing up, my sister used the motto: "If you ain't got something good to say about anybody, come sit by me." That's what she would
Mhm.
say. Um, so, but to me, Loki. You know that sensation when your buddy is about to do something stupid, funny, and he's about to pull some practical joke.
Mhm.
You know, maybe he's about to get baptized with bath bombs in his pocket or drop Mentos into the Diet Coke on somebody's table. You know, he's
Mhm.
going to do something that kind of just
Mhm.
mischievous energy that person would put away.
Mhm.
That is the sensation I get anytime when Loki's around. If there's no reason for that sensation and I'm feeling it, I know Loki's around, period. And true, I know Loki doesn't just do things for no reason. He always has a reason. But
Mhm.
that is the best way I can
Mhm.
describe this feeling when he's around. And he's always a lot of
Mhm.
fun. Um,
Mhm.
and I think it is kind of interesting that it is a very personal sensation, one that you have to, you know, kind of record and pay attention to.
Mhm.
And I don't think I've ever asked this question, Seffi. When Loki's around, what do you pick up on? How would you describe it? Because I know a lot of times you don't think about it, you just kind of know. So sometimes this one I am throwing you under the bus because I didn't say I was going to ask you, but I can't give you the questions because I don't know.
Mhm.
No, I understand. You're right. I don't think about it. I just know usually, but I think the best I can come up with right off the bat is anticipation. Like I'm there's something's about to happen and I'm there for it.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Chaos is ready to go. It's like you're
Mhm.
waiting on somebody to tell you they've got this great plan. Sounds like a horrible idea. Let's do it.
That sounds like most of my
Yeah.
friendships.
I so it's just an anticipation of waiting for, okay, let's do this.
Okay.
Mhm.
But I am, I am partial to chaos.
You are. You are.
Mhm.
Um, so I mean that's one thing I would tell people to remember is that these are very personal. But one thing I want to touch on, and I think we all might have some manner of thoughts on this, and I know it's one that I've dealt with and struggled with and might have bitched about ever since I got into the occult community and started sharing my opinion. Um, got me in a lot of trouble too. Are the arcane senses, is clairsentience, clairaudience, the ability to see spirits, are these gifts that you must be born with or born under a special moon? I know we just passed a blue supermoon. Um, and if you're not born with it, are you screwed? That's it. No dice. Jade, you first.
Um, Honestly, just after my experiences of years ago versus now, I can solidly say that arcane senses are something that are learned and that they're not something that you're born with. Some people may have maybe a slight more connection than others, but everybody can learn it. I've seen people who have gone from absolutely nothing and have been able to build up a skill in some shape, form, or fashion on being able to tap into these senses. Even my own family, like one of my sisters, doesn't even practice magic, and she can has been learning how to tap into her arcane senses. And none of us are born under a special moon. We're anointed in some shape, form, or fashion of some special practice or whatnot. We are all just normal, average, everyday people.
Seffi, do you want to
Yeah.
go next, or you want me to go?
Yeah. I was gonna say that I agree with Jade about that a lot because, well, I've never seen a child that cannot. I've never seen someone not say that they saw something when they were a child. And one of the things about these being skills is maybe if you don't use them, you lose them, or more likely, we're told that we're not using anything. We're told that it's not really there, not to worry about it. So I think a lot of people shut it off. They stop
Mhm.
paying attention to it. They don't do anything with it. And it's almost like something I would almost liken it to art. Some people are born with like an artist's eye where they can see what they're doing, and some people train themselves to do certain kinds of art. And I think a lot of people, they don't shut off their arcane senses. And so they seem to be some special, um, special person. And maybe it's just because they were never taught to turn it off. They were never told, oh, you're
Mhm.
not seeing anything. Or maybe they decided that they were going to be a child forever. And therefore they just ignored everybody that told them that it wasn't real.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that's kind of the way I see it. It's something that can be trained. It's something also that some people have a little bit more skill at than others sometimes,
Now,
just naturally.
my experience, and every time I was challenged on my opinion, that got me in trouble because apparently, if it's not a gift, that's just a taboo to say. But tough crap. But every time I've been challenged to it, anyone that couldn't do it, as long as they put forth the effort and the work to train up their skill sets, I've never had a student who actually put in the work that didn't do it, that couldn't develop it. Hasn't happened yet. So I have to agree with you all because, well, I have my opinion for a reason. But Steffi, you touched on one that I find, this is another topic that gets asked a lot, and I think there's a lot of confusion around, and I like it because I get asked all the time, how do I go about activating my senses now that I've trained and I've been spending all this time working with entities, and how do you know when to open them to listen? Like, and my answer is I never open them because I just keep my senses active 24/7.
Mhm.
And then people's like, well, what happens if I get my senses and I want to shut them off or I want to close them? Now, I honestly think if you're that person that's afraid to open them, it's going to be harder to train them because you're not wanting to see it. And not wanting to see is one of the biggest barriers. But I do think there is something to be said for, instead of trying to open them, just try to use them and have them be there.
Mhm.
So when an entity comes around, I'm just kind of aware of it because I don't ever really shut them off. Is that an unusual take? What would you all say? Jade, you can go first if you want. Because I know
I don't
everybody's
think that's
talking about turning on and off.
I honestly don't feel like it's an unusual take because honestly, if you've been working to build your arcane senses, why are you going to continuously turn them on and off? Um, that's like walking around your house with your eyes closed because you don't want to see things around you and you're going to end up bumping into stuff all the time or fall, trip over or something. You learn the skill and build up the ability to see and sense all these things. And I just feel like if you put in all that time, you might as well use it. And have it to your benefit. And I just feel like it's more work trying to open them up and shut them off and then consciously having to keep on opening and shutting it versus just having it running 24/7. I mean, I never shut mine off.
Okay.
regardless of what's around me. I always keep them open. I may not actively be having my mind's eye actively staring at a wall, being like, okay, something's coming. No,
Right.
I
Right.
don't do that. But if something is near me, I mean, my first alert is always going to be my arcane touch or just whatever senses around me, and then at that point, my arcane sight looks over like, okay, what's there?
Mhm.
So I mean, it's always there.
And
And
I like how you said that, because that's going to be what I was going to touch on in a minute. But since you brought it up, we shouldn't think of it as on and off. We should think about what has our attention. And I actually have someone here who can attest to this. I am a big guy. I'm also a loud guy. Anyone who's watched the channel knows I can be loud. What they may not know is I can also move through a house without making noise and won't even know it. So if you're not actively paying attention, I can move in and out of a room without you knowing, and you won't know I'm there until I say something because you're not paying attention. And Sephi can attest to that because I sneak up on her quite often, not meaning to. So it's about what are you paying attention to? Because in our everyday life, you know, there's things going on around us that we tune out because we're focused on something else. And our arcane senses are the same way. So if an entity's walking by and you're not actually paying attention to it, you may not register it. Even more so than that physical person sneaking by. Okay? Sephi.
That's actually something I was trying to figure out how to say, because I don't think I turned my arcane senses
I'm
off,
convinced
but
you.
I focus. What was that?
Nothing.
I can get focused on things to the detriment of everything else going on. I actually blame myself a lot of times for when you sneak through a room, that think that I'm just focused on something else. So that's how I didn't hear you coming. So it's good to have something else to blame that on.
Oh yeah, Dad used to get on to me all the time. He threatened to put a bell on me once. He's actually the reason I started wearing my keys on my belt.
But if I'm really into something, it doesn't matter what's going on unless it's something shocking.
Yeah, you are a pretty
Like,
focused person. Either that or you're, I don't know if it's you're focused or you are just really good at ignoring everyone. I'm not sure which it is. Might be a little both.
I'm not sure which it is either, but I know that there are times that I'm focused on something and I will automatically move out of the way of something that no one else would see. So I do think that I don't turn them off, but I just don't pay a lot of attention to it unless it's something that maybe is trying to get my attention, or if I think I need to pay attention to something in the environment.
Yeah. Okay. Just so on the general open discussion of senses, did we miss anything before we get into perhaps talking training concepts or uses that you all think we might have missed? If it pops in your head, we can come back to it, but just...
I don't think so. We went over, sometimes we have to work to separate imagination and arcane senses. That's the biggest thing I could think
Okay,
of.
before we do move on, there's one thing I thought about. Aphantasia. If I'm pronouncing that correct. It's where you can't visualize a picture in your mind. This is a medical condition, and basically everything we've just described almost will probably make these people feel like they're out of luck. They are the group that's out of luck is what, but I'm wanting to tell you that's not the case. Your brain still processes information. When somebody's talking about their imagination, yeah, they may be able to see pictures. Yeah, you might not be able to, but their brain is still processing information. So as we go forward, if you have aphantasia, do remember, if you think of the word apple or something, however your brain or senses interprets what an apple is without seeing it, like just close your eyes and think of apple. You may not see the actual image, but get used to the way your brain constructs that information. Is that making sense? If you guys can articulate this better, please help me. But if you have aphantasia, as long as you know how that brain is interpreting that information, you can use that same information processing for your arcane senses. Okay? Did I articulate that well?
I think so.
Yeah.
It
I
made
do
me
believe
think,
so.
one of the things that's different with mine is when I'm seeing images in my head, they're usually cartoons. I don't really imagine people as real people.
I don't think I've ever known that before. That's pretty cool.
So my arcane senses work the same way. It's maybe different kinds of illustration, but it's not real. It's not, like I'm seeing you now.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie. If I had 3 wishes, one of my wishes now might have to be, I want Seffi to have the mask from the movie Mask, because I want to see what manifestation that is. Dating myself a little there. Okay, so training the arcane senses. When it comes to the arcane senses, I always tell people personally that I think as a magician, the 2 most important ones are definitely going to be your hearing and your sight, because if you want to get into invocation and work with entities, those tend to be the ones you need. And you honestly need hearing more than sight, because you can have a conversation without seeing them. But that's not to say those are the only ones, and that's not to say that the others aren't useful at some point. Now, if sight and sound are the 2 tallest, or 2 top tier ones that most magicians would want, my question is, which one do you think is actually the most important? Do you think those 2 are the most important? And which one would come in next, do you think, for you? Jade.
Dang.
Well,
I mean, that's really a toss up, because both of them are equally important. However, I mean, thinking of it as even with just like physical senses, you can function pretty well without sight, but not being able to hear would be pretty detrimental. And same thing would go with the arcane senses too. You can function a pretty good practice without sight, but being able to hear. So I agree with what you were saying, Drake, as far as, having that conversation goes, because I mean, you could have an entity sitting there right in front of you, their lips are moving, and if your arcane hearing isn't working, all you're seeing is their lips moving, and you can't hear anything they're saying. So it's basically just a mime show going on.
Mimes.
So I feel like if I was to rank the 2, I would say arcane hearing would be the most important, then secondly sight. Honestly, if we were to take it down to the top 3, I would say arcane touch would be the 3rd most important, because then you start to learn to feel and feel the energy through your arcane touch.
That makes good sense.
And that's not to say that learning arcane, smell and arcane taste isn't important. I mean, because they do come in handy in several situations, but I feel like those top 3 would be the most important to learn.
Yeah. Arcane taste is, Seffi's had to deal with me doing annoying things because of that one. All right, Seffi, what was your opinion on that?
Well, not to be boring about it, but I think those are the top 3. Although I might actually put arcane sight at the bottom of the 3. Because I mean, okay, you can't see an entity, but you can hear it and you can feel it's there.
That's a valid point.
Do you really need to be able to see it? If you can feel that it's there, you feel the energy, you kind of feel where it's at.
You remind me of my old martial arts mentor now. No, you really do, because I mean, it's like freaking Luke Skywalker or some crap, because there was a time during sparring where we were talking about tracking movements, and he's like, stop paying attention to where I'm going. You know where I'm at. Just feel where I'm at. You can feel quicker than you can see.
Mm.
He's like, you need to learn where the danger is. He's like, feel it. He's like, if I intend to hurt you, protect that area. Which from a Japanese concept, that is a thing. And it was a maddening training because basically you're not allowed to watch, and in his mind he can't intend harm without actually harming you. So, he had to hit me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what that, and you're right, because essentially what he was telling me is to sense his presence on where he was in relation to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a valid point that I learned that before I really knew what Arcane Senses was, and I've never really applied that. And
Well,
building on that, there's an argument that says like that sense of touch, that ability to feel, also ties into your ability to move and work with energy.
okay.
So you're right, that
I
could bump it
just
up there.
I just think that we see entities a lot different most of the time. You could ask somebody what Loki looks like. They may give you a totally different description than what you see.
That's another good
So,
thing. Yeah.
why being able to feel and recognize their energy, though? You know who you're talking to. You know who's whispering in your ear, shall we say? And maybe you don't need to see them
Exactly.
because of that.
You're right, because all three of us work with Loki. All three of us describe his presence different. But all three of us know his presence on cue. That is a very, very valid take. And I mean, if you think about it with your friends, people feel differently about this, different people. So, I mean, like, there's a lot of people who have varying opinions about me. Some people find me very funny. Some people find me comforting. Some people find me to be a safe person to be around. And then there's other people, their day's ruined if I walk in the room. I don't have to say anything, just my presence. And you see this in any friend group because the opinion you may have. But that presence is going to differ. And you're right, since they don't really have a physical appearance as we know it, they may have traditional artwork or traditional descriptions. They don't have a set physical appearance. I know Loki shows thousands of different appearances for me, as has Lucifer. Odin, his appearance changes, but he does tend to gravitate within the same form most of the time. So if their image isn't even fixed, other than just like knowing where to look when you're talking, which again, that could be relevant, does that sight matter? You may have just monkey wrenched it, Seffi.
Yeah, Steffi. But I honestly agree with your train of thought. I really do appreciate that the outlook on that. Having Arcane Sight bumped down to number 3.
So that puts touch and hearing at the top. Fascinating. Okay, so how would we go about training them? Especially touch, because that's a hard one. That's the one a lot of people seem to have the hardest problem with. And since we now got it in the top 2, we need to talk about this son bitch. Because how do you touch something that you don't know? Jay?
So, interestingly enough, I developed my arcane touch senses by playing energetic tag around my house with entities.
Okay,
Okay.
go on.
Just they would basically disperse and hide themselves in multiple spots in my house, and I would have to rely solely on my touch to pick up on where their energy is coming from and just walk in that direction blindly, basically.
Energetic hide and
Not
go.
opening up, huh?
Energetic hide and go seek.
Yes, exactly. Did not tap into him. Actually, they hid from my arcane site anyway, so because they can do that.
They can.
And I basically go around the house and figure out where they all were, and that's how I actually trained my arcane touch. I mean, I know there's other methods, but that's I turned it into a game because making the skill building practices entertaining and fun just makes it that much more easier to accomplish, at least on my part.
Yeah, no,
And
I get that.
so
I get that. The way I usually start a student, because I assume from square one, you may not have entities to work with or anything, is I tell them to get physical objects and try to, without physically touching it. I mean, at first you can start physically touching it, but then literally try to feel the object just by holding your hands around it, like this cup. I mean, if I was to tell you, do you know what metal feels like cool metal? That's a very descriptive term. And if that's essentially what you would feel if you grabbed this right now, is cool metal. So if you pay attention to how an object feels, and then you set it down without touching it, give your hands a rub to just kind of reset the nerves, and hold your hands around it, you can actually get that tactile feeling by focusing on that. That is essentially your arcane touch. That information of the physical touch is coming to your mind, and you can do this with other objects. When we talk about elemental energy, we do the same thing. Get you some dirt or a rock, feel that earth energy around it, and you're going to get if you do this with enough rocks, you'll get a very broad sense of what earth energy feels like on a broad scale. And I say broad because sandstone is going to feel different than granite. Once you get good enough, you can start picking up on those differences. Same thing with fire, just because you don't want to physically freaking touch fire. Fire might be the easiest one because heat off the flame is easy to feel. Of course, you can do it with water, and everyone knows air, because air energy, I honestly think, is the easiest one for anyone who's been outside. If you've never been outside, you're going to struggle. But if you've ever been outside on a hot day or something, or a windy day, and that breezes hit you, that sensation, that feeling. There's just something about it. That is generally how I would start people off, is actually physically feel it and then try to feel it without touching it. But in case I'm not, Sephi, do you have any thing you would add to that?
Maybe practice feeling your own energy,
That's actually a good one.
because feeling you have your energy, you start feeling, what it feels like as you start practicing, feeling it and feeling maybe what it could feel like, and also help you manipulating energy.
Yep.
So,
And that has the added benefit also, because it gives you a deeper awareness of you, which, when we're talking self-mastery, self-empowerment, those kinds of things, and later in your practice, if you're just starting out, later when you get to shadow work, knowing your energy is going to be important, because you can actually, there's a difference in your energy when you just got a stuffy nose, maybe allergies, or you slept wrong and you got a cold or the flu. There's a difference in your energy with each of those. So if you know your energy on a normal basis, that can also give you a baseline for something off. So again, Sephi comes in with some sneaky insights. There is something to truly be said for knowing your own energy, and weirdly, I don't think I've ever brought that up in class. when talking about developing Arcane Touch? If I have, I don't recall it. I yeah, I may have to start using that one, Sophie. That's pretty good. All right. So the next one would be hearing. This is another one that gives people a lot of trouble, but honestly, this is annoyingly, and I know almost everyone on this planet, and if they haven't experienced this one, how'd you do it? You're lucky. Arcane hearing. How would you train it? And when I say everyone's experienced it, raise your hand if you've ever got a song stuck in your heart, in your head. Baby shark, doo 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 doo. Baby shark, doo 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 doo. Luckily, I've never had that one stuck in my head, but I know Jade has.
Yeah.
That's why I chose it.
Thanks.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
Yeah.
I love
This
you.
is the
Um,
song that doesn't end.
Oh, childhood horrors. So
To
yeah,
tell myself the
just-
song that most often pops like a mind worm in my head for some bizarre reason is the I Dream a Genie theme. I will randomly catch myself just I don't know why.
Yeah. Developing arcane hearing, I did basically what like what we just literally talked about. I would recreate the song in my head down to as much detail as I could. To where it would be in my head as almost as if I was listening to it on the radio. And then challenging myself by changing up the song. And just practicing that over and over again. The problem I see a lot of people run into though with the arcane hearing though is when you do realize how your arcane hearing works, how to differentiate your own thoughts to information being sent to you from entities speaking to you.
Yeah, and that is a harder one for some people.
I mean, that was one that I struggled with a lot because, you know, a lot of times when you first start out with your arcane hearing, the information coming in will still sound like your own voice until you learn to separate yourself from that. Trying to learn how to get those, I mean, just get those thoughts being sent to you versus your own thoughts, just trying to figure out, is this actually me that's thinking this, or is it somebody else sending messages to me?
Now, how did you get past that? Because that is an area I have trouble articulating with students, is because for whatever reason, my brain has always just separated out my weird, and I have weird thoughts, believe me. Steffi's lived with me, she knows. And other thoughts. It's just, there's just been like a, nope, that's just my stupid, you know. So it's been hard for me to articulate it. There have been times where I wasn't sure if it was me or not, but it's never been that one where I had to work hard at developing it, so it is hard to articulate. How did you move past that?
It was a kind of a multi-step process, but first and foremost, I actually had to understand how I talk, how I think personally.
Right back to knowing who you are and feeling you.
Yeah. Leading right back to Steffi's comment about knowing your energy. I had to really think deep down how I actually talk, because everybody talks in a unique way. We all, you know, we all speak to each other, we understand, but we all have our unique way of talking. So once when I had a general basis of how I talk and the phrasing that I use and how I articulate, then when I started to speak with entities and hearing those thoughts come in, I was like, okay, that's not how I would say something like that. So obviously that's coming from somebody else. Because even like just the slight difference in accent or a different way you finish your sentences off, those little fine details like that, sometimes it takes some practice to hone in on those fine details, but that's how you can really differentiate what your own thoughts are versus somebody else's.
Structure of sentences and phrasing quirks. Yeah. Those are good
I
ones.
mean, grammar. Grammar is a big one that I've learned because I honestly have very big issues trying to figure out words to come out of my mouth. And if I'm trying to put my own thoughts together and all of a sudden I hear a random word being shouted at me in my head, I'm like, okay, that's somebody telling me how to finish my sentence. Because
Yeah.
um
Because another great way is like if you have a thought and you have a sentence in your brain and there's a word in there, you don't know it, you're going to need a dictionary. Odds are, and this is really, I think, why entities are so easy to separate from me, because they like to use words and I'm like, I don't know what the flip that means. I now need a dictionary. That's also a great way. How about your thoughts on this, Steffi?
It's interesting because when I think back when I was trying to separate, it was hard. But the reason that I eventually learned to separate because I had an entity pushing me to get out and do things I was uncomfortable with. And I wouldn't be pushing myself to get out of my comfort zone. So it was kind of one of those things that was like, oh, yeah, this is not me. So I slowly started separating that because of that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're not a very public person. You're not very socially oriented. Yeah, I do remember at least once an entity pushing you to be front and center in a Norse event. Partially front and center, more checked out because it was a kind of an evocation event. But so yeah, I kind of get what you. That may even be the same event. I don't know.
Not the same event,
Not the
same
same
entity.
Event. Ah, okay. Same entity, different event. That makes a lot of sense, though. So see, and those are questions that do come up quite a bit. Now, here's a question about arcane senses and entities. What happens if the entity's telling you to do something you don't want to do? What if you're being called to work with an entity you don't want to work with? I know the answer to this. Pretty simple. What do y'all do?
I mean, I
What?
would just politely, acknowledge their presence, acknowledge their request, but say, kindly at this time, I am not interested in pursuing that path, and leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's it in a nutshell. That is, you're not required to do anything an entity requests, and you're not required to work with them. So,
Right.
Yeah. But when it comes to hearing, Seffi, did you have to do anything to train your hearing, or was it just like most other things, like from your childhood, did you just carried over because you never lost that whimsicalness about it?
Like I said, other than trying to separate it from being in my head, I didn't really do anything to train it so much. Once I realized it wasn't me, it may have been considered training because I tried to listen more so that I could know what they're saying.
Yeah.
Instead of, just honestly, sometimes I kind of just ignore my own thoughts until I want to come back to them because they're my thoughts.
Right.
They'll come back. But if it's an entity, they may not say it again.
No, that's a good
So
point.
active listening in my arcane hearing.
That's a good skill in life too. But yeah, when something's coming through, that's a good point. Think about, is it something that you would do? Is it something that fits you? Is it fits your patterns, your structure? Is it an alien structure? Is it mimicking a structure that shouldn't be there? Or is it completely out of place? Like I can tell you right now, if the thought, tomato and avocado salad sounds good. That's not me. That's not me. Okay, first off, avocados hate me. And well, tomatoes are the devil. Okay, I know I'm Southern. I know I'm not supposed to say it, but it's true. Tomatoes are the devil. I will not eat a tomato. I've been accused of marrying Seffi because I can just give her tomatoes instead of me eating them. It has been accused. Um,
I wouldn't complain.
see, so
I love
that would be a
tomatoes.
complete alien thought for me. That's just not to be true. I'm not that big of a vegetable eater, but that particulars, I've seen people and they're like, "Oh, it's amazing." I ain't eating it. So, and that's a very specific example, but knowing yourself helps you sort through these when you're dealing with your arcane senses. And again, this is one of those reasons why meditation is so important early on. You really need to get comfortable with you. And you really need to know you. And I think this day and age, that's one of the bigger problems most people run into. We don't take time out to even remotely understand ourselves.
Yep.
Let's see. So we talked about touch. Okay, any tips for sight? Because I know I had a question, I think it was yesterday or today. No, it had to be today because I was in the woods yesterday. Can you see your surroundings around you with your eyes closed with arcane sight? The answer, of course, would be yes, you can. How accurate will determine your skill set, of course, but how did you all go about refining your sight if you had to? Sometimes I think Sephi has a head start here. Jade, so we'll let you go first because you can be like, I just did it. I have a feeling.
Yeah. Sight was a hard one for me to another hard one for me to develop. But essentially what I started to do was get simple things like a strawberry or an orange and look at it in my hand, because we always have fruits in our house. So I look at it, hold it, turn it around, get the details of it, and then close my eyes and recreate what I saw in my hand in my head. And that's how I started to develop my arcane sight, was just doing simple things like that, even if it was like getting a toothpick.
Okay.
You know, something simple that was easily replicated. Losing my train of thought here. Replicated into my mind. So toothpick, a spoon, and just trying different things. And then when I had the solid piece made in my head, I would start then challenging myself to turn it around and see what the other side was with my arcane sight. For perfect example, the spoon, you know, you look at it from the top and you see the dip in the spoon, but then if you flip it over, then it caves over, trying to get those details as you're spinning and turning things around. And I still use that practice to this day. Getting to figure that out was a challenge for me. I honestly believe I had shut off my arcane sight when I was little. I had a very active arcane sight as a child and saw some things that were absolutely terrifying, and I shut it off. So trying to retrain myself how to use that was the biggest challenge for me.
The scary stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sephi, did you have to do anything or improve it at any point?
I think mostly with reading. The reading that I did starting in my childhood was really took care of most of that for me, because I would always see the story unfold in my head. There's a story that my mom likes to tell on me where I was looking for a movie in our VHS tapes, and I could not find it anywhere. And I was trying to describe it to her, and I was sure that we owned this and we had it, and I've seen it multiple times. She had no idea what I was talking about. And it turned out, and I didn't realize this till a couple of days later, that it was a book that I'd read. So
That's some seriously detailed arcane sight right there.
Mm-hmm.
so I don't really think I've had to train it or refine it. It's just, I think, well, I'll say that maybe the books did train and refine it.
Mm-hmm.
No, I could see that, because if you're enjoying a story and you're using your arcane sight to create your own private theater experience. I mean, that I can't think of really anything better to train it. I mean, we talk about the Arcane Sanctums as a cheat for all senses, which we have a video if you want to know more about Arcane Sanctums. So I mean, books are probably, especially this day and age, underutilized for sure. So no, I get that. I've actually started doing that when I listen to audiobooks, and it makes the book more enjoyable. It really does. That's very cool. So Jade alluded to something, and I get this question a lot, and oftentimes my answer isn't liked. So I'm going to get your all's takes, opinions, thoughts, and what you would tell someone if you had to advise them. Remember, we're on YouTube, Sevi. What happens if you develop your arcane sight, arcane hearing, or arcane senses, and you see something scary, traumatizing, fearful? You see a spirit that got their head blown off with a shotgun, and they still carry their injury, but you don't want to see those things. You want to develop your arcane sight, but you don't want to see anything that might scare you. Now, I've told them, yeah, it's not really a filter thing, just like your eyes. You either see it or you don't. And on my thought process or opinion is, if you try to filter it, you're only going to make it harder to develop. But that being said, and Jade, I know you got little kids and they're active, and well, you mentioned your own childhood experience. Without just taking the cold is what it is jerk response that I logically put forward, how would you approach that one?
Here's the thing. I'm going to try to say this as nicely as possible. When you open up that door, essentially, of opening up the arcane senses, you're going to be opening yourself up to everything. And there's really no way, like what Drake said, to filter it out. You're going to be, I mean, you'll see the fantastic things that are to be seen with the arcane senses. And there's absolutely some beautiful things that you can see. But at the same time, it's just like real life. There are some terrifying things out there along with life. There's a balance in there. You can't see all the good and not see the bad. So, developing those arcane senses, you do have to be fully prepared that there will be things that you will see. There will be things that you'll hear that, might not be pleasing. And, it comes with the territory when you open up that gate.
Okay. I'm going to come back to you for a follow-up on that. Seffi, your thoughts?
I'm not really sure what to say to that, because, I mean, it is really kind of a turn it off and on kind of thing. Like, if you want to see the things that you want to see, and it may depend on what you're seeing as well. Because, I mean, there are certain things, like you talked about entities being able to hide from your arcane sights. I mean, maybe you could ask them to hide from you. I mean, depending on what it is, like you being a mom, if there's something in your environment that you don't necessarily want your kids to see, maybe you can ask them to hide their or change their appearance.
Where training yourself to actively ignore what's going on around you come in handy.
And I can do that very well, so maybe that's why I'm like thrown off by this question.
Yeah, see, because that is the thing. Because I mean, the senses are there, just like your physical senses, and we can train our physical senses to ignore things around us. Anyone in the military knows there's chaos and stupidity abounding 24/7 all around you, and you got to kind of tune it out unless you want to partake in it. Or if you're just trying to sleep. Um, so, and in other professions, this takes place too. But Sephi, I think you've always had that skill to just tune the world out if you needed to. Though I do know how to get your attention if I need to, unfortunately for you. So the follow-up question, Jade, that I had, because I do think learning to tune out what's around you can be a useful skill, because it's essentially learning to help you focus on what you're trying to focus on as opposed to getting distracted. It's the same skill. But the follow-up question is, children naturally see these things. It's just there. They haven't learned to tune things out. They haven't learned to focus. I mean, they are like sponges, and instinctively they're trying to experience the world so they can learn as much as they can, so they can be an independent humanoid, and not have to rely on mom and dad, so they can, get their, go do whatever good or damage they're going to do to the world. Maybe a little bit of both. Taking a case that I worked when I was doing some paranormal work, everyone thought the spirit was extremely wonderful spirit, was helpful. They didn't feel any danger from it, but the kid was terrified, absolutely terrified. And that's the reason they finally contacted the group that I was working with at that time, only to come and find out, thanks to Arcane Sight, that the reason they were terrified is this was a female human spirit, very motherly. I think, from what we found out, she was a mother, who essentially was shot from behind. So she was basically missing her face. And no matter how good her intentions were, the kid was seeing that, which ghosts are real. That's an unsettling thing. How would you handle this with a kid? Because I'm going to tell you, I worked with the spirit and let the spirit know specifically what was going on, and it was hard for the spirit to find a way to work around it, because some spirits can't, human spirits, mind you. But the entity did find a workaround, thankfully. And I remember that night not knowing what to tell that boy. How would you handle that?
I mean, that is a tricky one. I do actually already have something that Steffi kind of touched on, which is, so for the current entities that I work with, I do ask when I do my initial conversation with them that since I do have children in the house, if they could kindly not appear in a scary manner, because both of them do have very active arcane senses. So I just ask that when they are physically, or when they are in the house moving around, if they could just not appear in a scary manner. And they are all very understanding, and will abide by that. Now, if we have one off here or there of spirits passing by, my son has seen a couple of things that were scary, and I have told him that if there's something that's scary, to one, not be afraid, and to just kindly let them know that he is afraid, and if they could please, not be within view of him. And just I'm teaching him manners with spirits, not just shouting at them, telling them to go away, but just kindly saying, okay, you're a little scary for me. Could you please just go in the other room? Go, just a way for him to say that he's a little afraid of them.
Okay.
And that has helped with him. I actually have seen a lot less screaming at night when he's had issues in the past of seeing things at nighttime. I also do give him a bottle of enchanted water to help make him feel a little better.
Legit. I would do it too.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm just, when it comes to kids, just reassuring them that, that, they just need to not be afraid and to just kindly ask for them to please, to ask them to go away in a nice way, not just say go away.
Okay.
And most of the time, most of the spirits have been pretty understanding when it comes to that for the passerby ones.
Okay.
There's been a few where I've had to chase out.
Safi, I know you've worked with kids a lot, so how do you have a thought on how you would handle this?
I mean, I don't know why you say I've worked with kids a lot. It's been years.
It has been years, but compared to me, you got more points.
So I guess, I mean, that's a good way. Like I was saying, to talk to them, ask them not to be so obviously scary if at all possible.
Mhm.
But I mean, as far as like explaining it to the kid, I mean, let's think age has a lot to do with it too.
Mhm.
Because a lot of them you can explain to them, okay, yeah, this person's not meaning to be scary. This is just, a disfigurement
They have an
of
animal.
their spiritual self.
Mhm.
The ones that's seen Harry Potter, I mean, they've seen Nearly Headless Nick.
That's
Mhm.
actually a good resource to pull on.
Yeah.
They've seen how the spirits, they couldn't help the way they looked on Harry Potter, and I'm sure that's a starting a conversation there. Some of them just maybe, a little bit more headless than Nick.
You know what, Steffi? I am totally stealing that from you.
That's
um,
actually a good idea. Point to like because that does give a lot of very friendly ghosts that were presented in potentially gruesome ways.
Mhm.
That's pretty interesting there. Okay. Um, is there anything we're missing? Anything we should cover? In your all's opinion about the arcane senses?
I think we covered a good chunk of it.
All right. So that's going to lead me. We're going to wrap up with two questions. First off, what was the hardest sense for you to train, and why? Seffi, I want you to go first on this one because I'm kind of curious.
don't know that I've done any training on taste, and I definitely don't think I've done any training on smell. Um, um, probably hearing though, just the separating it out part, because you might have those stray thoughts in your head. You're not sure sometimes whether it's some entity that you've not encountered before speaking to you, or if you had a sudden stray thought of killing the coworker yourself. Um,
She's joking, you two.
um, definitely joking, but sight, like I said, was almost. I don't think I'm not sure how to say that with training, because I've not done a lot of actual dedicated
No, you haven't. Your practice
training.
is very organic, and it surprises people when they realize how lack of focus your practice is compared to me.
Mhm.
So I get that. Well, that would be a hard one to articulate. Jay, curious, what was your hard one?
Hardest one for sure would be sight. And their first reason was because I was honestly terrified of what I would see. because I knew once when I opened that floodgate that I could potentially see everything. And at that time, I was exceedingly fearful. I mean, heck, I was even afraid to be alone in a dark room with a single candle without looking over my shoulder every 10 seconds. So, I getting over that fear was the biggest first hurdle, and then the second hurdle was getting past the idea that arcane sight is not with your eyes. Because I would sit here and bang my head up against the wall like I don't see anything.
I can see that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That one can be tricky. For me, it was hearing. And the reason is the weird one, because I am that person, like, due to just paying attention to different things and the way I grew up and a lot of the training, I pick up on every freaking sound and detail in my environment. I can tell you which neighbor started their car just by the way it sounds. So because I'm able to pick up on all these random noises on such a large level, even though I may not hear you say hi to me right next to me, that made it really hard to figure out, am I just hearing someone over here across the road, or am I actually hearing the entity? That was really, really, ironically, the ability, and like my Raven, who was helping me at the time, she's like, most of what you're picking up with your arcane hearing. There's no way you just heard that with your physical ear. She's like, so your problem is you're hearing it and you're not getting through where we need you. And that one just gave me a real headache, because I had to tune out all the normal things that I want to hear on a normal basis. So yeah, that was definitely the hardest one for me. So the next question, what was the one that was the most fun and why for you? Because we covered useful earlier. Now let's talk about fun, just for funsies. Jade, you got a shit-eating grin on your face, and we're going to let you go.
That's going to be hard to pick just one, but I think the most enjoyable one to learn was arcane smell.
Okay.
Because I mean, there's certain things that I have set up in my house to where if triggered, I smell that something has been triggered.
Right.
In a sense. And so just the learning that, across the house something happened and I can smell pineapples. The weird way it works and how it just messes with your mind, that you're smelling something and you're smelling it like it's clear as day, but there's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
Was absolutely fascinating. And then working with my senses to be like, okay, I have a bottle of wine, arcane, like I have a bottle of arcane wine in my hand. Can I smell it? Can I pick out the flavor notes? And being able to pick apart things like that was just the most enjoyable process. Of being able to pick out, do I smell berries in this wine? Do I smell this? And being absolutely nothing in front of me, but I have a bottle of wine. Imagine, well, not arcane wine, but arcane wine. Same thing with like a dish. Let's say I had manifested, a full meal in front of me, and I'm trying to pick out what I manifested with my smells. Did I have, a slab of pork right there with some veggies, and seeing if I can pick up on those smells. I cook in the kitchen all the time. Like the kitchen's my favorite place in the house. So being able to utilize that and pick up on those things was just so much fun.
That's pretty cool. That is cool. All right. Which all those reasons are reasons why I love using the Arcane Sanctum, because you can go there, you have your ingredients, So those are great ways to do that. Seffi.
Well, mine's probably going to be vision, I would say, because of the way I was I'm able to see things when I'm reading, but mainly because I had a lot of fun building my arcane sanctum and seeing everything in it. And every time I go back to it, I see everything where I put it. And I can move it around, I can change things.
It makes a lot of sense. That does. I gotta admit, for me, it came down to taste. And unfortunate, I mean, this has pros and cons because as someone who's taken culinary classes, as someone who loves to cook, it allows me to combine things quickly and get a ballpark of what it's going to taste like, and sometimes even dead on. But I've mentioned this in live streams. My co-magician is a dragon that loves wine. And there's been a lot of times where I've sampled what he's drinking. Many of the bottles I've never even seen. I don't even think they're on Earth. You want my honest opinion. But there have been times, and Seffi looked at me weird, like we were at a store and I happened to glance over and there's the freaking bottle I tried last week. And I just wandered over to the shelf. It's the same label, same year, everything. And I'm like, I'm buying this. Why? And it's like, I want to know if it tastes the same. She's like, you've never had it. I was like, technically no, but astrally yes. Which led to me buying an entire bottle of wine just to do the comparison, which, just so y'all know, it came out exact. It was freaking amazing. So for me, that's always been the fun one. The next one for me on that would probably be sight. And that comes from, I love to go places. I love to see new things. And from astral travel, and eventually when I got into soul travel, being able to see all those places, and scrying's my favorite divination. So, but definitely taste is the most fun because it allows me to tinker with things before just randomly diving in to see if it'll work. And again, like it lets me get an idea of something, like trying a food that I've never had before, which something I found out, and Jade, you've probably figured this out too. If you are in your sanctum and you want to know what something tastes like and you're working on training your taste, if it's one you want to train, you can actually try the food in your sanctum and then make it or go buy the item. Like if you've never had a Big Mac, that seems unlikely, but if you've never had a Big Mac, you could have a Big Mac in your sanctum and then go to McDonald's and get a Big Mac, and you could compare the two experiences, So it is a relatively easy one to test in some cases, but it's a lot of fun for foodies. So now I learned this the hard way. If you're on a diet like carnivore or keto, don't go to your sanctum and eat chocolate cake. Don't do it. It sounds like an idea because you're like, then I can have my cake, but it won't affect me. You're right, it won't. What it will do is trigger the craving. It will not eliminate the craving. It will make it worse. Don't do it. I tried it. It's a bad idea. Ixnay on the chocolate cake. Pro tip there. Okay. All right. I think we covered a lot more than I thought we would on this. I really did. That seems to be a norm here. So, any closing thoughts on this, or are we good to go? What would you encourage people to start with, or how? Or Jake? Any closing thoughts? You can say no.
All I could say is when it comes to training your arcane sight or any of your senses, as a matter of fact, and by all means, you don't have to start with one that everybody starts with. If there's one that calls out to you, do that one first. But don't beat yourself up if you are struggling, because everybody learns at their own pace. And, try to figure out what method of practice works for you. Everybody's going to have, different ideas and different ways to practice, and just find what meshes with you and run with it.
That's good advice. And I mean, it is good because as good as my senses are, I can honestly say when it comes to arcane sight, I reading a book, listening to an audiobook, it doesn't matter. I cannot create the full cinematic experience that Seffi describes. I just can't. It'd be freaking cool, but I ain't there. So we are all different. We're all going to have varying experiences. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just figure out what is you. Get to that point and work on developing it from there. That's a valid point. Seffi, any closing thoughts?
Don't dismiss things as not being there just because somebody else can't see them, hear them, feel them, whatever it is. Pay attention. You might find out that you have more of your senses awake than you think.
That's a valid point, and that goes for even if another magician doesn't pick it up. Because just like Jade said, they can hide from your senses, which means they can selectively hide from your senses. So it is very possible for Loki to be standing there mooning me without me able to see him, but Seffi be able to see him. Why would he do this? Probably to make her laugh. It is possible for those things. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's a good point. Don't dismiss it just because someone else isn't picking up on it. That's a good one. Very good. All right, ladies, thank you for joining me for this roundtable on Arcane Senses. We probably should have done this one a long time ago. Seffi, thank you for joining us again. It's always a treat to have you when you have the time to join us, because I know you often work when we're filming. So it is nice. Hopefully you'll join us again soon.
Maybe.
Jade, I know that by the time this comes up, I don't know if it'll already happen or not, but you're working on some live workshops. You're wanting to get live
I'm
workshops,
actually
online school going again.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be working very hard over the weekend to get the next live workshop into the system so we can release it and announce it.
Awesome. So if it hasn't already announced, keep an eye out for that. And if it has announced, keep an eye out, because our plan is to try and get those cycling pretty regular again now that our lives are semi-sane again. It'll never be sane. All right, everyone, you have a wonderful evening. Thank you both again for joining us. And if you enjoyed this and had some fun, be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications so you're notified anytime we release a video, or go live. We're live every Sunday for Magical Coffee Hour, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I believe. And you only get the notifications if you turn them on. All right. Till next time, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.